Yeah, thanks everyone who's showed up. It looks like we have a good turnout. I'm going to introduce the presenters and then we'll get started. And thanks all for being here. It's first one for this Middle East section, so I'm quite excited about this. It was a lot of work, and but we got a lot of help, so it's been rewarding. I'm going to start with Kevin, and the reason actually is because there was something that triggered me. Not that's not the right word. Tweaked me, and in Neil's bio that I want to have a little reflection on before we get started. So first of all, Kevin Bampton. He's our Chief Executive Officer of BOHS. He's on the board of the UK Council for Work and Health and is a chair of the British Standards Health and Safety Management Committee. He's also a former professor of public law, professor of comparative justice, and fellow in health studies with extensive experience in professional education and training. And thank you for being here. And he's certainly given up a lot of his time specifically on our trying to get our sections set up here. So I really appreciate that. And I think we all do. So thank you for that. Now, Neil, he's also going to be presenting here. Neil Pickering is a chartered fellow of the Faculty of Occupational Hygiene and is also a chartered safety professional with over 30 years experience in occupational hygiene, health, safety, and environment at global companies such as Rolls-Royce, and that is the aero turbines, not cars, JCB, the big diggers, and now a consultant. Neil has previously been a BOHS chief examiner and later the registrar. So the Rolls-Royce thing reminded me of a story. My uncle who was from India, came over to the UK on a quote unquote Rolls-Royce scholarship, which was literally a scholarship for Rolls-Royce to be a mechanic on these giant turbines. And if you've ever seen turbine mechanics, it's an impressive thing. But while he was there, he had I think it was one of the managers there, I guess, recognized that he had some aptitude for numbers and encouraged him to go on and do his engineering degree, which he did. And it has opened up in a whole new world and a whole new, life for him, his family, and his kids, who are now, lawyers and they're North Carolina right now. But and he was an engineer, one of the managing engineers at a large exchanger company that actually worked in my business. I'm from Shell, and the company was serving a lot of our industry. But I thought it was just one small gesture led to a whole new world opening up, and I really hope we can do something similar with our group, and I think it's really important. So thanks for that. It was nice to remember that. So thank you. So with that, I'll hand it over to you guys.
Okay, so I'm Kevin. The good-looking one's Neil. He's just turned his camera off. And for a lot of you, you'll probably know a lot of what we're going to say. So please forgive me if I'm going over ground that's familiar to you. But for the sake of completeness, we're going to start with the assumption that not everyone knows everything. And we're going to, rather than taking questions at the end, we're going to pause each as we go through. And if people have got questions about particular levels or particular things, please feel free to shout out as we go along. We'll take a pause and we'll answer questions. So I'm going to sort of do the first part of this, and then I'm going to hand over to Neil when we get to the Chartership, because there's nothing like hearing from a chartered fellow themselves. So the purpose of the webinar today is so that we can outline the qualification framework for occupational hygienists, to explain the membership levels of the Faculty of Occupational Hygiene, and to outline how these can lead to chartered membership and indeed chartered fellowship. So that's what we're going to try and do today. So if at the end of this session we manage to all understand that, we've achieved the outcomes. And I need your help, because you need to ask questions if anything isn't clear. So I'll start at, if you like, the end, which is the end goal. So what do we mean by chartership? So chartership's quite a strange thing. You'll find it in several countries, but it's really sort of something that has its home in Britain, because it has its home in the notion of a royal charter. So being given the honour by the royal family of being treated as the preeminent, the first and most important professional body in an area. And BOHS has a royal charter for its work in terms of workplace health protection. And its qualifications and awards are now done under the auspices of the Royal Charter. So a chartered occupational hygienist is a person who's gained a specific level of skill or competence in occupational hygiene and is recognised by the society as such. And there are three elements of chartership. One is experience. Chartership isn't simply a qualification, it's something that recognises your experience, your skills in the field. Part of it is qualifications, which is the verification that you've learnt the things that you need to learn, done the training that you need to have done, and understand things to an appropriate level. And a really important element is also professionalism. It's not just about being experienced and knowledgeable, but it's also having a commitment to good professional ethics, to continuing professional development, and to operating at the highest levels within the profession. Okay, so I'm going to start really at the bottom. So BOHS is a society, so anyone can be a member of BOHS, so the British Occupational Hygiene Society. Ordinary membership doesn't give you the right to any letters after your name. It's not a test of your professional knowledge. You pay a membership subscription, and that enables you to get access to materials, etc. But you're effectively supporting the work of the society. The society is a charity, it's not for profit, and in fact all of its membership is heavily subsidized by the other activities of the society. Something that you might not be aware of, and hopefully you'll spread the word, that we do have student membership. So anyone who's in full-time post-16 education can apply and get free membership of the society to keep up to date with what's going on with occupational hygiene, and hopefully whet their interest in being with us and potentially joining the profession. Or if you're in the first year of study on a BOHS course, so for example doing a W module, you can apply to have free student membership. So hopefully you'll go out and evangelize and try and get as many people to join the society as possible, because we really do want people to have a commitment to understanding occupational hygiene. Okay, so in the starting point within a career is associate membership. So this is between 0 and 3 years of experience. You can acquire associate membership by the completion of one W module. So this is one of the W series of modules that are delivered by training partners across the world in association with the Occupational Hygiene Training Association, and BOHS is the awarding body for that. Or if you've completed an approved degree, one of the BOHS approved degrees, we've got a list of them which we'll put up right at the end, or if you have an IOA NAR accredited qualification, and again, there's a list of those that we'll put up at the end. There's no time that you need to have served before you can become an associate. You just need to have completed either a W module degree or an IOA NAR qualification. But by becoming an associate of the faculty, you have decided that you are going to behave as a professional within the occupational hygiene profession, which means that you have a commitment to CPD, that's continuing professional development, that you are going to continue to learn, and that you need to evidence that, and we do audit it, and also that you're committed to the code of ethics, which guides the conduct and behaviour of professionals. So the assessment of that is whatever the assessment was for your W module or your degree. But once you are a member of the faculty and are committed to the profession, then you are able to call yourself an associate and put AFOH after your name. So at that point, we're going to briefly pause to see whether there are any questions, which I don't think there are, so I will move on. So between 3 and 5 years of experience as an occupational hygienist, you can seek to move to licentiate membership. Now, licentiate membership is, if you like, the threshold for being an independent professional within the occupational hygiene profession in the UK. Different organisations have different thresholds, but we consider that licentiate membership, you're probably going to have achieved all of the outcomes necessary to be able to show that you are a competent professional. And it maps quite neatly over against, for example, the competency framework that AIHA outlines alongside with BGC. So your entry requirements to become a licentiate. So in order to apply to become a licentiate, you need to have completed 6 W modules, so that's 6 of the OHTA modules, or have completed an approved degree, or have IOA NAR accredited qualifications. So those are what you need to enter. You need to have had 3 years of experience within occupational hygiene, and that could be at the same time as you've been studying. You need to continue to be committed to CPD, continuing professional development and code of ethics. And you need to submit yourself for an assessment. And the assessment is a different form of assessment from a standard exam, because the assessment is a portfolio, a group of evidence that you've put together around your personal learning, which evidences how that experience has helped you form your professional knowledge, skills, and attributes. And then you are then invited to a professional discussion, which is a meeting with a panel of members of the faculty who then ask questions to test the extent to which you actually have the knowledge and skills and are able to articulate them when asked. So this is a sort of a face-to-face examination by speaking rather than by writing. We've got plenty of experience of dealing with people who, for whom English is not their first language, so we make allowances for that. We do indeed sort of sometimes take personal learning portfolios where it's not been written in English because English is not the first language of the person, but we are a British qualifications body, so normally the language of assessment is in English. And if you're successful at the professional discussion, your portfolio, then you can claim to have a certificate of operational competence in occupational hygiene. And if successful, you can put the letters LFOH or Cert OH after your name. Obviously, if you don't continue to be a member of the faculty, but just want to show that you have the qualification, you have Cert OH. If you want to be a licentiate and you continue to be a member of the faculty, committed to CPD and the Code of Ethics, then you can put LFOH. So licentiate membership is the membership of the faculty, so at the faculty level, and the Cert OH is the professional qualification. And I'm going to pause there for a moment for any questions, and also just to check in with Neil. Neil, have I missed anything important?
No, absolutely not. Sounded good to me.
Fantastic. Any questions? Okay.
I believe we've got a hand up, and
right.
questions just come in there. A couple of hands up.
Great. So, do you want to sort of?
Kevin, can I just ask a quick question, please?
Yeah.
For Certificate of Occupational Hygiene, I've got the old PCERT modules from back in the olden days. You can actually just sit the exam, a cert exam as well, can't you?
Yes.
Rather than just the modules.
Yes, you can.
Yes, there is. Okay, thank you. You're just making sure. Thanks.
Yeah. So obviously there's quite an illustrious history of different qualifications in the past. So the aim of each of these membership criteria is not to exclude. We want to get people sort of progressing, and we'll always find a way wherever possible to enable people to progress, to maintain their membership to the faculty, and to move forward. And that's a continuing task, and we are always looking for ways to make it an accessible profession. So an alternative route, and there are a couple of alternative routes to being a licentiate, is if you're not working in general occupational hygiene, you might be working in a specialist area, particularly LEV or local exhaust ventilation or Legionella. And so we have specialist licentiate membership for people who have either done proficiency qualifications in LEV, so the 4 proficiency qualifications, or they might have done the W505, which is the equivalent OHTA qualification, plus the W201, which is Principles of Occupational Hygiene. So if you've got either the 4-pack of P modules or those 2 W modules, and you have 3 years of experience, which can have been while you were studying as well as working, then if you can evidence from your curriculum vitae, from an outline of your work experience, that you have management experience and associated skills, as well as commitment to CPD and the Code of Conduct, then you can submit yourself again for that oral discussion, and but that needs to be supported with a report, so an example of your LEV work, and if you've taken the W505 route, a portfolio of evidence. Now, the reason for having that requirement for a portfolio of evidence for the W505 is that within the P modules, there are certain practical skills which are assessed in a way that they're not assessed in the W505. So the aim is to try and get everyone to the same level and test the same things. However, because the W modules don't test the same things as the P modules, we need to look for that additional portfolio of evidence. And if you completed that, you can claim a certificate of competence in control of the working environment. Maintaining your membership of the faculty means that you can be a licentiate of the faculty, so LFOH, bracket S. No prizes for guessing that S means specialist, and you can put COC control, which is after your name, which is the qualification. So it's quite a little bit more complicated, but it's a specialist route for those who are specialising in LEV and have, if you like, moved further in that particular direction than others. There's a similar route for Legionella that works in very much the same way, but I'm not going to go through that at this point. But what I will do is I will pause for questions, but I'll first check in with Neil. Neil, have I got it right so far?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Fantastic. I'm going to leave the hard one for you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
We've got a question from Cathal Malone, based on the previous slide, asking us whether we need to complete the assessment before being a licentiate member, or is it just the modules? You do need to complete the assessment. The licentiate member is very much a broad competence and experience that's being tested. So although you've done each of the modules individually, you then need to do the PLP, the personal learning portfolio, and then sit for the professional discussion, because it's taking all of that together and saying that in total you're competent across that range of things. So yeah, you do need to do the assessment.
Yeah, so to reinforce that, the modules are the entry requirements. You need to have completed that before you can apply. The assessment is the PLP and the professional discussion. When you're successful with that, then you get the certificate and you're eligible for membership of the faculty at licentiate level. So you enter with the modules, and if you're successful in the assessment, you get the certificate, and then you can move on to being a licentiate of the faculty.
Dr. Kevin, sorry, Dr. Kevin, this is Haytham from Oman.
Hi.
Hi, Kevin, how are you? Actually,
Very
for
well.
the licentiate memberships, for the assessment, we need to have like a personal learning portfolio.
Yes.
What is the content for this portfolio, and what is the minimum content has to be there?
So there's a set of guidance about what needs to go into the personal learning portfolio. What it's there to do is to help you to put together evidence of the work that you've been doing as an occupational hygienist that support the claim that you've got the experience, etc. So this might be a range of reports and other material that you've undertaken, reflections that help the panel understand your work. I think, Neil, you've seen a good few of these. Perhaps you could give an idea of the range of what might be seen in a PLP. Would that be possible?
Yeah, absolutely. We try and make it so that no matter what kind of job you might do, there's a way of demonstrating what we're looking for. So we're really looking for experience in a range of areas. So we expect something around chemicals, something around physical hazards as well. And it might be a report, it might be a paper, it could be a presentation that's been delivered at some event or other, it could be some training that's been delivered. What we ask is that it is to the standard that's set out in the document that Kevin referred to, but we're really happy to receive different sorts of evidence, providing it meets those criteria, because we recognise that not everybody goes out and does measurements and does reports all the time. Sometimes people have a different role, maybe the researchers instead. So we need to give the scope there. We also look for evidence that you've been doing some CPD type activities. So, maybe it's the first time you went out to do a noise survey. So we'd expect you to just write a little bit about what you learned as a result of doing that noise survey, just to show that you've got some self-reflection about your current skill level and what you learned out of doing the task.
That's really helpful. So the emphasis is it's personal, it's about you, what you've done. That's sometimes not the easiest thing to do, because if you work in an organisation, then often there's other people who contributed to it, and that's where you might sort of highlight that this was the bit that you did, and etc. It's about learning, so it's not about producing perfect things. You might produce something that you've done and you sort of say, well, I did this early on in my career, this is awful, and it's awful because of these different things, and I now realize I could have done it better. And it's portfolio in that it's not just one set of things, it's a collection, a bit like a scrapbook of your professional experiences, that when you take it together, tell the story of how you have developed and grown, and how you've been able to experience and understand the range of different activities that you would hope for from a competent professional. So there's a degree of flexibility, and I think we try and help people to structure that in the way this is going to be most useful in telling their story. But it is very much about personal learning, because the whole thing about being a professional is a professional is guided by their understanding and knowledge of the profession. They're not just doing what someone else tells them to do, and that's what we're trying to identify. And that kind of leads nicely on to me handing over to Neil, who's going to explain, when you get that little bit further along your career, to chartered hygienist.
Thank you, Kevin. And actually, I'm just going to add a little bit to the bit on the professional learning portfolio as well. I know some organisations are quite sensitive about the material that goes into a professional learning portfolio. They think that they don't want to make it clear it's a particular company. We do accept that people can redact certain elements of that if that's necessary. Obviously, we still need to see the survey details. We still need to see what you've done in terms of controls. But if you need to blank out the name of the company, then that's acceptable. And of course, all these documents are treated with confidentiality in mind as well. There's only one or perhaps two people see it, depending on whether the chief examiner or someone needs to take a look as well. And the other thing I'd add is that you get 3 bites at the cherry. So if you put a portfolio in and it's not quite right, then you will get some feedback as to what you need to do to the portfolio to increase it, improve it to the standard that's expected. And you'll get 3 opportunities, well, to put a submission in and 2 feedbacks. So it's not necessarily successful first time round. That may not be anything to do with the quality of the work. It may just be about clarifying maybe a gap or something else. So you do get some feedback.
Neil, I just something I should have mentioned, which is that as a member of the faculty, you can join the mentoring scheme, which is the means by which you can be partnered up with more experienced hygienist or someone working in a slightly different field, who can give you feedback and support with your professional journey. And that could include helping you with structuring your portfolio as well. So a little bit of help outside the formal help that head office would give you.
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, those mentors can help you, as you said, with preparing the personal learning portfolio, also with preparing for the professional discussion and progressing on to the chartered member, which is what I'm just going to talk about now. So this is the grade that Kevin spoke about right at the start, which is the peak, I suppose, of professionalism within occupational hygiene in the UK. And this is something you can achieve after 5 years plus experience, which is chartered member. So for this, you need a BOHS accredited master's degree or the IOHA NAR accredited professional qualification, or the CERT OH or iCert OH as a starting point. You also need some years of experience, and that's 5 years of experience from the beginning of the first qualification, which again can be at the same time that you're doing the studying. Now, what we're looking for in terms of that experience, though, is it is a little bit more than doing putting pumps on people, getting results and putting a report together. We're also looking for elements of management creeping into the work, the more advanced part of the occupational hygiene profession. So we're looking for that as well in the experience. In terms of evidence, again, we're looking for a commitment to CPD and the Code of Ethics. really important to us that people commit to both of those. And in terms of assessment, we have a professional experience portfolio this time, which is very similar to the personal learning portfolio, but it is at that advanced level. So we're looking for slightly different things at this point. We're looking for around 5 or 6 reports, but sometimes people put in up to 10, where you're really setting out at a more advanced level what it is you've done. So this is more than, as I said before, more than taking measurements and giving us a report. It's also thinking about the ethics perhaps behind it, maybe some history behind it and what is going on there, and providing more of a management level advice to the organisation. Now, maybe you've done a measurement in one area and it needs, this raises a concern across the whole organisation, and you take that to the next level. So it's that kind of thing that we're looking for. And again, it leads to a professional discussion. So again, a room of, well, these days it's mainly virtual, but a group of people that are sitting and effectively, as Kevin says, doing an exam face to face. It's an interview, if you like, which is demonstrating that you have the competence to become a chartered member, a chartered occupational hygienist. And if you've done the Cert OH or the iCert route, then we also need the L202 UK law module plus a researched essay. So the researched essay is really just to demonstrate that you're able to pull together arguments across a range of sources of information and deliver a good argument, a good persuasive argument on a particular topic, so that we can see that you're able to research and pull things together. In terms of the qualification, this leads to the Diploma of Professional Competence in Occupational Hygiene. And if you remain a member of the faculty, a member of BOHS, then you get to put CMFOH after your name. So that's Chartered Member of the Faculty of Occupational Hygiene. And if you don't remain a member of the faculty, then you're able to put DIP-OH after your name as the alternative. Okay, has anyone got any questions?
Is it worth just pointing out the reason why for the Cert OH and the iCert you need to do those two elements is that the chartered member has certain privileges within the UK, one of which is the ability to advertise on the Register of Occupational Health Professionals. So a knowledge of UK regulation is really required. I think there's some flexibility there, but if there's any possibility of someone operating in the UK, it's very hard to do occupational hygiene at a leading professional level and not understand the regulatory framework. That's an online module that's actually delivered by BOHS rather than by any of the training providers. And the reason for the researched essay is that chartered membership is determined by our regulator, the Privy Council to the monarch, to be at master's level, and so that deeper examination needs to reflect work that is at a master's level, which includes the requirement to be able to inquire at the forefront of the subject. So these are things that are kind of they're things that we have in place to enable us to meet our regulatory requirements within the UK, and because the charter is something that is conferred by the UK sort of monarchy, we have to comply with those rules. So just so that you know why we're doing it. Shall I move on to the?
We've got a few questions, so
fantastic.
Obviously, Luke, you've put your hand up, so I'll hand it to you first, then I'll come to the questions on the chat.
Yeah, sure, I did. Thanks, Neil, for explaining the chartered membership routes there. So my question, well, I have two questions, but the first one is more like I'm being curious about how how it works. I'm sure over the years, there's the assessment for the chartered membership has changed. For example, I know probably before now, the professional discussion may have, not the professional discussion, the research essay may not have been there. Maybe those in the past, maybe 10 years or so did not do that. So I'm just curious as to if this was changed for the old members, did they have to perform this same kind of research essay again, or they just continued with their chartered membership? That's the first question. The second question is around the entry requirements. So is it cast in stone, or are there some few exceptions to it? For example, the BOHS accredited master's degree. If there's a master's degree from any other institution that has sort of like the same kind of the modules or courses that would be required, then that may be accepted by BOHS.
Okay.
Neil, I'm going to let you answer that one because you'd actually pointed this out on the presentation.
Yeah, no problem at all. So let me take the first one first. So people that have been through this previously, and you're right, it changed because when we became a chartered body, it got a royal charter, the requirements changed a little bit at that point because of the charter, and actually we took it as an opportunity to refresh the requirements and simplify them to some extent, but make sure we were still achieving the same level. So we've always aimed to achieve the same level in terms of qualification, but we do it by different means. So you're absolutely right. If someone had done the previous version of the equivalent level, which at the time would have got them membership but not chartered membership, because we weren't allowed to be chartered until we got the Royal Charter, they just transferred across to become a chartered member. Okay, but they still had to achieve the same level to get to that level in the first place. In terms of other master's degrees being potentially accepted, well, the first thing we'd encourage you to do is to talk to the person who's taking the lead on that particular course and ask them if they'd like to apply to BOHS to be an accredited master's degree, because actually it's something that we obviously want to encourage other organisations to do, other universities to do, because that way it gives people a more straightforward route into BOHS and the faculty. If that's not possible, or that it's perhaps not quite covering everything that it needs to, then we would take a look at the details of the course that you've done and use that as a means of deciding whether or not you've covered all of it, or whether there's elements of it that you've covered and there are other things that we perhaps ask you to do to fill in any gaps that we identified. Okay, so that's the approach we'd take.
Thanks, Neil.
Encourage your universities to come forward for accredited master's degree. That would be, or for that matter, bachelor's degree.
And we don't charge anything for accreditation of master's degrees or bachelor's degrees.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's something that then the university is able to say, put BOHS logo on and things like that, which may or may not help them, but we'd like to think it would. Okay, thank you. Was that, did that answer your question, Bobby Julie? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that answered my question. Thanks, Neil.
All right, perfect. Thank you. In that case, let me come to the questions that are on the side here. So, Darren, do we have any guidance documentation by way of an example portfolio, etc., that applicants can read? Well, we've certainly got a document that sets out what we expect people to do and the flexibility that we provide within that. We don't actually have an example portfolio because, unfortunately, as I said earlier, people tend to be quite sensitive about what's in their particular portfolio, and they don't really want it to be shared more widely. And also, we don't want to necessarily constrain people by what someone else has done, because we are, as Kevin said, we are where we can be flexible. So we don't. This, I think, is where the mentoring process would come in. There are plenty of mentors out there that have gone through the process or have been involved in developing the process, and we'd be more than happy to take a look at the sort of information you've got and see whether it meets the requirements, and give you some advice on how you could add to it if you needed to. But no, we don't have a portfolio that's available to share, for the reasons that we'd either have to invent it, which really wouldn't do the job, or we'd have to get permission from people to share, and we just don't feel that's the right thing to do. It sends the wrong message.
But just to say, Neil, like as we expect of our hygienists, we're all into continual learning, and we're in the process at the moment of trying to significantly improve the guidance that we give, just to make it a little bit clearer, a little bit easier to understand what the process is. You can always do better, and so we will be in the next few months, hopefully, providing some better and clearer guidance on the whole assessment process. We know what we're looking for, but that's not always as easy to fathom if you're trying to apply. So we will be reaching out to people who've gone through the process, just to ask them about their experience, and we're going to try and improve the guidance for everyone.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, absolutely. Continual improvement is what we're certainly aiming for. Python, you've asked, is there any BOHS preparation course available prior to the assessment? Not that BOHS provide. There are some training providers out there that would be, I'm sure, prepared to put on a preparation course if that's what you wanted to do. It's one of those things that I think tends to get put on when there's enough demand, rather than being as a matter of course. So yeah, a training provider might well do something like that.
It's highly likely that at this year's conference we'll be running a sort of an event to give a bit more support for people who are sort of are going to attempt their chartered membership assessment, and the conference will be recorded, so there'll be a recorded version that will be available if you're attending virtually, and will be available to members.
Thank you, Kevin. That sounds really good.
Thank you.
Excellent. Now then, will you have a training provider for W modules in the Middle East? I think that's down to supply and demand, essentially. I think the training providers certainly do them online. So, you can certainly access them from the Middle East. I know in previous times, maybe before COVID, if a company wanted to put on a module in the Middle East, then they could effectively ask the training provider to come out to the Middle East, pay for the travel, put them up, and then get it delivered face to face. I am sure that's still possible, but yeah. Certainly virtual training is certainly also available.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. There are providers who provide most of the W modules, courtesy of Occupational Hygiene Training Association, online. But if there is a demand, then it's certainly possible to arrange it, and BOHS would be delighted to work with the Middle East section to see whether or not there are opportunities to run W modules in the Middle East.
Thank you, Kevin. And Gareth, oh dear, this is an interesting one. So 5-year experience evidence in your previous company, which has since been closed down, so you've got no access to your past work or reports. Can it be verbally demonstrated? Well, it can't be verbally demonstrated, but we have in the past allowed people to recreate, shall we say, something that they have previously done. So we would certainly be open to a conversation around that, Gareth. All right, and the sort of thing that depends, I suppose, how much of it you'd be relying on. Yeah, there's certainly that opportunity.
It would just be 1 year's worth. So, and I do have some evidence, so I should be okay. But I thought that was a worthwhile question to put to you.
Indeed, yeah, thank you. And if it's 1 year's worth, we don't we don't necessarily need evidence from every year of your experience. So it may be that you won't need to dip into it at all. But I suppose if through that organisation you were doing work in a particular area and you had a particularly good example, then I could see you might want to dip into it. So yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, just to reinforce, and that's really helpful. I mean, these time frames are there to ensure that you have the opportunity to have the range of experience, to get the depth, etc. They're not there to, if you like, require you to show what you've been doing every day of each of those 5 years. What we're looking for is evidence and examples that show that as a professional you have been able to work in that professional capacity, self-directed, dealing with problems, managing problems, making recommendations. So whereas the portfolio for the licentiate is about how you are becoming a professional, the portfolio for the chartered members is how you work as a professional, what you've been doing. So it might be a little bit difficult to recreate the details of a report, but you could almost certainly go through the thought processes that you undertook, the problems that you addressed, etc., even if there was a gaping hole. And we do understand that some companies are incredibly tight on any information that they require, and what we're looking for is evidence, but we don't need to have everything chapter and verse. It needs to be credible, and it needs to give the panel a credible basis for being able to make a decision about your eligibility. So there's a degree of flexibility because we're trying to understand your professional life from this portfolio.
Indeed. Okay, that's all the questions we've got, Kevin.
Fantastic.
You want me to pick this one up as well?
Please.
Will do. Okay, so the final grade of membership for the faculty is Chartered Fellow. So Chartered Fellow is not about having additional qualifications. It's not about doing more exams or anything like that. This one is very much a recognition that someone has done something to forward the profession of occupational hygiene. So having been a faculty member, so a chartered member for at least 5 years, you can consider applying to be a Chartered Fellow. What we're looking for, as I said, is seniority in the field of occupational hygiene. So you have got some seniority in your role, and that you've also made a distinct contribution to the advancement of the profession. Now, that distinct contribution needs to be over and above your job. If you're effectively saying that I've done a really good job, that's what you expect. That's what a chartered occupational hygienist does. What we're looking for here is a distinct contribution to the advancement of the profession. So something like you've been really supportive around setting up conferences, or perhaps like Paul, you've set up a regional organising committee or something like that. The kind of thing where you're volunteering to help, or you're reaching out into the community and maybe getting the message of occupational hygiene out to universities and people like that. So it's something that's advanced the profession in some way. And again, we're looking for a commitment to CPD and the Code of Ethics. The application for this one includes references from 2 chartered fellows of the faculty who hopefully will support your application to become a fellow, because if not, that's obviously not going to help you to become a fellow. So pick your reference people wisely, but they also need to know you and have observed, not day to day, but they've interacted with you sufficiently that they can confirm that you've done this distinct contribution. And you'll need to send in your curriculum vitae, your CV. No further qualification required, but if the faculty deems that you are indeed at this level, then you would be able to use the letter CFFOH, so Chartered Fellow of the Faculty of Occupational Hygiene, which is the most senior position you can reach in the faculty. I'll pause.
And at this point, it's open for questions again. I'm going to take the screen off for the time being. So, Neil, do you think we've covered everything?
Well, I think so. Yeah, at least for now. You know, I mean, there's going to be a lot of detail that people will probably be interested in, but until you actually try and do this, you don't know what that detail is. So I think, you know, the BOHS office staff are excellent at providing answers, and if they're not quite sure, they reach out to the team that are involved. So yeah, please, if we can encourage you to take this step, then reach out to us if you've got any questions.
I think there was a question. There's a question in the chat from Sharon. I just saw flash up.
Yeah, how important is it to employers, members of achieved charter level? Well, I suppose it depends on the employer. I mean, certainly on the larger companies, particularly the larger companies that have other occupational hygienists, I think they'd strongly encourage the chartered level. I think companies that are just starting to look at occupational hygiene and think that's a good person to have in the team may not recognise it as well, but clearly BOHS is pushing the chartered level because it demonstrates that management capability. So yeah, I think the message is getting out there. Kevin, have you got thoughts?
Yeah, and I'd say other things to consider within the UK, and apologies that it's a UK qualification. So for our own directory of consultancy for the higher level skills to be banded at the top level of consultancy firm, you need to have a chartered hygienist in there, really. And to be able to operate independently as a consultant, you need to be a chartered member. In coming months, you may have seen that there was a webinar on that. We are also going to be looking at setting up a register of hygienists, and chartered membership will be important for that. Of course, employers look for different things, but the one thing about Chartership is it does clearly state your ability to work independently at that high level. There isn't anything as clear as that, perhaps apart from the certified hygienist qualification in Australia, which you'll know lots about, Sharon. Hopefully that answers the question. So, do we have any further questions? Well, there's a lot more material available on the website, possibly too much. We always benefit in head office from any feedback. So if you're looking at stuff and you think that doesn't make any sense or we don't understand, please do ask, do drop us a line, don't struggle, because we will only improve our guidance by getting feedback from you. If you've got specific questions, you can always email qualifications@bohs.org, and there's always someone who's happy to talk to people about it, whether or not it's faculty members, etc. As I say, if you're thinking about this journey and you're a member of BOHS, you can join the mentoring program and get a lot of support there. If you're not a member of BOHS, please think about it. We do a lot of really good work, and your membership helps. We do heavily subsidise membership, so we try and keep it as inexpensive as possible to ensure people can help the society. I'm going to hand over to Paul. But first, I'm going to thank Neil, who's been brilliant in joining us today, and thank you all for your time and kind attention. So over to you, Paul.
Great. Thanks all, and thanks everyone for their participation. It always makes these meetings, virtual meetings, go better. And again, I think I would echo what Kevin just mentioned there about not supposed to be a sales pitch. But you get a lot of value with the BOHS membership. Yeah, again, I would encourage everyone to think about that. And I think, if there's anything that comes up in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to myself or I guess anybody on the who set up the call. But it's great to see so many people here. And I look forward to I'm looking forward to the next one, to be honest. So thanks all. And I think for that, I don't have anything else. I think I will let everyone get on with their day with 2 minutes remaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for organizing this.
All right. Everyone have a good day. Thank you.